how did the idea for gangs first come about?
By accident, really, as many things happen in life. I was asked to stand in for somebody else who dropped out. But when they asked me, they actually asked me if they were asking someone for the first time to present it. However, they didn't think that I would know Adrian Gill, who's very posh and from Edinburgh, and I'm not so posh from Essex. They would actually know each other, we're actually very good friends. So when I retorted what the job that Adrian's just turned down, there was a lot of huffing and puffing down the end of the phone. Anyway, I ended up doing it. It was very badly organised, but in the process of doing it, I met a guy who was in the Bloods. That's a gang in Compton, very famous gang that's in direct opposition to the Crips. Bloods wear red, Crips wear blue. And for a series of meetings, we got to meet this kind of quite senior guy in the Bloods. He was an amazing guy, a guy called Hand Dog. He'd been shot 27 times, which I didn't believe when I first met him, until he took his top off and promptly asked me to put my fingers into most of the holes in his body. He was a fascinating guy, incredibly bright, very verbose, knew a heck of a lot about black American history, the civil rights movement in the United States of America. And one thing I couldn't help thinking was the fact that he'd been born 100 metres in any other direction, or maybe 200, 300, he'd have probably gone to college, he'd probably had a very good job because he was a very bright man. Unfortunately, because of the situation that he was born in, he had ended up becoming a senior ranking member of a crime gang. And also, what struck me was that the proximity to the enemy, or the Crips. He actually said during the interview, if I said get down, I don't mean get dance and you hit the floor, because I will start shooting. And he was, it kind of really opened up the image that we're presented on MTV, the image that we're presented in the movies about this being a glamorized kind of sexy way to live. I mean, he didn't have a nubile blonde with fake breasts. He didn't have any bling. He had a rusty Mac 10. He had a Smith & Wesson tucked down the back of his trousers in case the Mac 10 jammed. He also had a knowledge of weapons that I can only, compare to the soldiers that I've met. I mean, a lot of the weapons that weren't in use were wrapped in Vaseline that was mixed with bleach that can kill DNA. He knew how you change the barrels on a Glock to change the identity of a weapon after you've used it on someone. His understanding of his own physiology was incredible, because he'd had his chest had been cracked open, his spleen had been removed, he had bullet holes in him. He looked like a pincushion. But having said that, he was still incredibly fit, considering, he looked after his health. He wasn't a user of drugs, but, he'd had more lead through him than, a battalion of soldiers might go through. I think the critics of the show will say that we've attempted to glamorise it. I think the problem with a lot of those critics they haven't really watched the programmes. I would never serve to glamorise the lifestyle or what people do, because predominantly most of them live and die by violence. I'm fascinated, and one thing that's become very apparent to me in the time that I've been travelling is that it's a growing problem. It's not being solved. People find it very hard to solve the problem. There is a direct correlation between poverty in a country and its gang membership. There's also a direct correlation, particularly in the South American countries and what the so-called third world countries that we visited, to the fact that when wealth is controlled by a small proportion of the population, and for instance in El Salvador, I think it's something like between 10 and 8% of the population control 90% of the wealth, then you have gangs, and you also have civil disorder. And you also, those 9 or 10% then have military police on the streets, or armies on the streets, which we saw in El Salvador, which we saw in Colombia, which I saw in Brazil. So those gangs are very different from some of the other gangs that you meet, but I'd say there are comparisons to be made between hooligan Nazi gangs in Poland and gangs on the streets of the flats in Cape Town, but there are big differences as well. And I think that's what fascinates me, that it isn't really a simple, basic story, because human beings aren't simple. They're complex, and therefore the reasons that they group into gangs are sometimes very complex as well.
obviously, I have a balaclava on my head, and the lady next to me is Elena, our translator. She has a balaclava on her head. And it wouldn't take the most brightest person to work out the cameraman possibly hasn't got a balaclava on his head. And, you know, we haven't got cuffs on, so we could look out the window, but we're obviously doing this to gain their trust so we can go there and film this base.
Never more really than 4 people go in, because A, you don't want to have attention from the police. These people are very untrusting. So they consequently don't want to have people drawing attention to them in case they get shot. So you're generally going very, very, very kind of in small numbers, sometimes less. I've never gone on my own yet. I mean, sometimes I go on my own to meet people, but predominantly it's 3 of us, sound, camera, myself, and maybe a director, translator, or a fixer. So sometimes other people do those jobs. So around about 3 to 4 people. And you know, one thing that always people say, do you have protection with you? Well, we've never had protection. There's a very good reason for that. These people don't like anybody threatening them, coming into their environment that could be deemed to be a threat. And as we found out in the first show, the insurance company insisted that we wore bulletproof jackets, Kevlar jackets to go into the favelas. As we were putting these on when we got into the vehicle to go up into the hill, the translator said, you put these on, they will shoot you to see if they work. Because if they work, they'll take them off you and wear them themselves. So you'd never seen 3 people get undressed so quickly.
But you still must have found yourself in situations where you're thinking, I'm just sitting here in a t-shirt opposite a guy who's high on drugs with an AK-47 on his neck.
Yeah, it happens quite a lot, actually. I think you can get blasé about it to an extent. You get better. I've got better as the series has gone on in trying to judge the danger, the point of where it's going out of control. I mean, I've had a lot of guns pointed at me now by people who are high, and that's the thing that worries me. You can sort of like gather what someone's up to when they're sober, but as I say, most of these people are on drugs when they're carrying their weapons, and you always meet them at night. I mean, that's gangster time. They don't tend to work 5 to 9. So, you know, I've also made the equivalent. It's like trying to herd cats. Trying to get them together in one place sometimes is virtually nigh on impossible. And also the great thing about these people is, if there isn't it great, is the fact that they can spot BS, you know, a mile off. And I think that's one of the things that's worked in our advantage, that I'm not really a trained journalist. And I'm not saying that journalists do BS, but they have an agenda generally when they go in, whereas we just sit and get to know them. We try to chew the fat and eventually sort of win some understanding between us. And that's when they start being far more forthcoming in terms of the interviews that we do. And I think we've been very fortunate in terms of the access, and that's gone down mainly to the very good researchers that we've used. But we've only really used 2 for this particular 4 programs. There were only 2 researchers, and they did a fantastic job in terms of getting us the access. But then again, I say to you, is these people are very untrusting, so you never go in with more than 4 people, if that, and you never have any protection with you, because it intimidates, and the last thing you want to do is intimidate someone who's high on drugs, who's got an automatic pistol or weapon in their hand.
And have you or the crew ever been actually threatened on or off camera?
Yeah, lots of times. You know, there'll always be, in these gangs as well, there's always a competition between, there'll always be an alpha gang member, but he'll always have a loyal servant and disloyal servants around him. And there's always an element of jealousy and preening that happens when you're interviewing these people. And the jealousy can manifest itself in a way of taking it out on us, threatening us. The good thing is, a lot of the times I have simultaneous translation, so I have a lead in my ear, and what they're saying to each other can be picked up through my mic or through the sound man's boom. And when they start suggesting that they want to hurt us or kidnap us or do something else to us, I can generally sense the mood. If I can't understand what they're doing, you can sense the mood. And other times I can actually hear what they're saying because it's being picked up. And a lot of that generally springs from jealousy that one gang member's getting more attention from the camera. I mean, the one thing is definitely true as well. These people live very short lives. And the camera is often used as a form of epitaph, as a form of recording their existence on the planet. And, you know, we know that people that we've interviewed have either gone away to prison for hundreds of years, or they've actually been killed after they've talked to us. So it has actually been, in many ways, an actual epitaph or a way of recording their little time on the planet.
Well, you have a very good interviews technique with the gangsters, and quite often you're not even speaking their same language. Tell us a little bit how the simultaneous translation works.
Yeah, I have to say that it's been invaluable in terms of making the programs more digestible to an audience. I think you had to have gone through a translator word for word back and forth. They would lose their immediacy.
So what actually happens? You have a...
Basically, there will be someone out of the room, or maybe not even sometimes in the same village, depending on how good the frequency is, the reception. And I will talk to the gangster. Someone will translate there and then in the room what I've just said. But as that gangster talks back to me, it's being recorded back to someone some distance away who was retranslating what they've said into my ear. So I'm here, as they're speaking back to me, I'm actually hearing it in a different language, in my language, as they're talking to me. But there is a funny story about that. When we were in Moscow, we went to visit a human rights lawyer that defended immigrants against illegal police action against them. And we did a shot with myself and the cameraman and the sound man getting into a lift, going up the stairs. Now, I could hear the translator in my earpiece. So she said, "Ross, are you coming?" I said, "Yes, we're getting in the lift now." And I've been taught a very small amount of Russian, which is "Очень приятно, pleased to meet you. Меня зовут, my name is Ross Kemp." Anyway, so I go up to the door with the crew over my shoulder, knock on the flat door, open the door to the lady. "Меня зовут Ross Kemp, очень приятно, pleased to meet you." And as camera crews are likely to do, we piled straight into a lounge, and she started blabbering to me in Russia. And then I got, "Ross, where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the room." And they're going, "Well, we can't see you." Well, I said, "It's a big flat. Where are you?" And the women started talking to us in Russian. The camera crew is still running. And we realised at this point that we are one flat down. We are actually in the wrong flat. And this woman has just allowed us to walk into her house and wander around and start conducting an interview, in fact, with her. But there you go. There's a gas tube inside the magazine there, yeah? And then he'll load his kind of steel ball bearings. And obviously the gas behind it projects the balls. So we go. It hurts. Is it loaded? There? I'll see if I can shoot it. Yeah, Kemp. And again. The ball bearings are small, but they go right through the bottle. My dad was in the army, and the family had been in the army, and also I've done a number of dramas where I've had to actually kind of strip weapons and show their working parts. Grandfather was a gamekeeper, so I just grew up with like guns and weapons and stuff like that. So, it's helped during the series, I have to say. Not that I'm some kind of shooter or shotter, as they're called. It's just that it's actually helped in many ways for people to know that we have a knowledge of the said firearms when we're dealing with them. Also, it's helped my safety, or made me aware that when we've been with people who are on drugs and they've got their fingers on the triggers, I can tell whether there's one in the chamber, and also I can tell whether the safety's off or not. When you're putting the round into the magazine, don't you do something with your fingers?
Yeah, we actually put the wooden glue you put onto your fingers. If you put the spot, but we simply take a mist, you put it into the palm, then you just rub it. The wooden glue performs like another skin.
So it fills in your fingerprints?
Fingerprint. So your fingerprint won't be
On the gun.
Odd, just odd that you can become that close to people that you know who are murderers, and sometimes rapists, and sometimes other things as well. You know, people who commit incredibly violent crimes. I mean, John Mongrel, I will stand by this probably to the day, of all the people that I've met, and we've subsequently done more gangs, probably one of the most evilest men I've ever met in my life. And again, to be honest, I did have some sympathy for him. Again, because he went to Portsmouth prison when he was an incredibly young kid, you know, and he had no option really. He had to go and kill someone he was ordered to kill, or he would have been killed himself. I mean, thank God I've never been put into that situation, and thank God many people aren't put into that situation. It'd be very interesting to see how many of us would behave. Do I ever bond with these people? You undoubtedly bond with these people. Even with Nazis, you don't go and do that training day. And that's what it's designed to. I mean, it's exactly what Hitler did with the Hitler Youth, for instance. You know, he made people go for extremism, extreme situations, go for extreme situations with extremists, to become extremists. You know, and you couldn't help, at the end of that day, when I went through I got set on fire and they kicked me out and they shot me, they were all patting me on the back, and I was, you know, I was Comrade Kemp for a bit, or Nazi Comrade Kemp. And I know I went for a drink with a good friend of mine afterwards. In fact, I'm looking at him. And we had to dissect that day and look at what it meant and what was really ultimately behind it. Because it could be conceived by many people as being a good old jolly jaunt out on a Saturday afternoon in Moscow. But actually what was going on behind it was far more deviant and sick. But you do bond with these people. You can't, because you spend so much time with them, and you inevitably end up socialising with them. I mean, I can never forget, in one of the places that I went to, the guys had taken E for the first time. They normally dealt in coke. I grew up with coke, so E was a great novelty for them. And once the interviews were finished, I ended up, because they knew that I could clear a weapon properly, they ended up giving me all their weapons. So while they were dancing off their faces, I sat there with all the guns at a table with a bottle of Skull in my hand, with an arsenal on my lap. And they kept, because obviously they thought that the head honcho had given me his weapon, therefore they could all. So I became master of arms for the rest of the evening while they danced into the wee hours. Another bizarre evening in my life. For me, John Malhats has to be one of the most remarkable men I've ever met in terms of being a good spirit. I think without him, that prison would probably explode, because it's overpopulated, vastly overpopulated. And he keeps that prison, he's like the pressure gauge on a cooker. And he knows when to let them let up steam, he knows when to actually reduce the pressure and put constraints on them. He also spends so much time with those people. He lives inside the prison grounds. He is a remarkable human being, and I have to say that's the other thing about the programmes, is that it's not all about, you know, glamorising bad people, if that's the accusation. You know, we do sometimes show that good people. You know, one thing I've also worked out is, you know, he was born bad. I don't think that's the case. Most of the people that we meet are just victims of the environment that they live in. Some people, not like in the UK, maybe in the US in some places, but sometimes in the US, they grow up into such impoverished environments and they have no education, and there is no way out for them out of the situation that they're in, and they feel hemmed in anyway. It's just a natural human reaction, really, to group together.
Now, you put yourself in some fairly extreme situations. For example, in Moscow, you decided to go on a full training course with the Nazis. Why did you do that?
It's sort of about winning trust. I mean, they will do things, and it's not just in Moscow. They will ask you to go somewhere which they know is, you know, obviously a very dangerous place, and you're very much putting yourself into their hands. And that's all about one thing, I think. It's about winning trust, and also getting them to sort of be on side in terms of them opening up and being honest with you about what they think and what they feel and what they do, particularly when they're committing illegal acts. So to go along with them and to join in, I mean, getting set on fire and shot at with a steel ball bearing gun was probably not the best Saturday afternoon I've had. either was, laying in the back of a pickup in torrential rain for 7 hours in El Salvador, the best Wednesday night I've ever had, or whatever night it was. But, you do that. And also there is, I'd be a liar if I didn't say that there is an element of enjoyment in some of it, because it is a challenge to myself. I thought I'm not going to be outpaced by a Nazi, so there was a bit of element of competition inside me as well to prove that I could survive whatever they thought they were going to throw at us.
Спину. Готов? Ноги поджигай. Спину. На счет 3 работаем. Раз, 2, 3.
This is the most extreme test I've ever had in order to gain access to a gang.
Boys, there's no ammunition in my gun.
Well, also what you don't see is, the cameraman couldn't come with me for the entire, run, which involved being in stupid things like jumping off a building into snowmelt in the darkness up above your waist, up to your neck, and swimming the whole length of a 100-metre car park in darkness. And then climbing out and then jumping down again in complete darkness into a car park, and then running out directly into direct sunlight, and then running along walls which were like 17, 18 stories up, and then jumping across gaps after you've been in complete darkness. Cameraman can't cover that because he just can't keep up with me, and also he can't go into 100 metres of snowmelt in a subterranean car park with no lights on. So a lot of the stuff you don't see, and for my own vanity reasons, that annoys me.
And it's obviously a very heavily male-dominated environment. Is it an all-male team that works on gangs?
Far from it, I have to say, and very proudly say. Generally a lot of the crews are men, but one of my researchers, one of the bravest ladies I've ever met, is Marta Shaw, and she has been in some extremely dangerous situations with me in El Salvador and in Jamaica and various other places. So no, and I have to say that often works for us in our favour. It actually helps to have a female along to actually kind of change the mood a bit, because it could become macho, mano too much. So it often helps to have a female around. Frequently we've shot stuff that we've thought, once we're back in the UK and looked into the edit, that it was too graphic and it was too upsetting. For me, after all the things that I've done lately, I think for me one of the most disturbing things was seeing the mother, or arriving at the murder scene of the 2 young boys that were shot in El Salvador, 2 brothers. They had been tortured and then executed, and one had been shot obviously in front of the other. And you could see clearly, what we could see with the naked eye was the burn marks and the cuts where they'd been burnt with cigarettes before they'd been able to kneel down and killed. And when they were lifting the bodies up, they still had their white socks on. They were incredibly young as well, and they were shot for $5 each. When the mum turned up, the wail that she made is a wail that you'll hear across the world when someone loses her sons or they lose their daughters. And that's the human part of that, and also the fact that I thought we were being intrusive by being there and looking and filming the bodies of these 2 very, very young boys. That, for me, will always sort of disturbs me. But, you have to also think that, by showing what we show, we're hopefully dissuading other people from taking that kind of lifestyle on board and thinking that it's glamorous and it's wonderful and it's great. For me, yeah, there's always some kind of roller coaster of emotions during the filming of these programs. I'm away from home a lot, so you get lonely. You also end up spending a lot of time with people who take a lot of drugs, and they generally give them ups and downs. and I become very close to them, you know, and so you get to feel for these people as well. You feel for the poverty that they live in sometimes, or, you know, you meet the victims. I mean, that's one of the very sad things about what I have to go and do, is you have to go to graves, or you go to mothers whose children have been raped and murdered, or you actually meet, you know, people who have been disemboweled, or lost eyes and limbs, and you have nothing, no money or anything. So, you know, yeah, it can be very upsetting. But also, I still think it's worth doing because it informs people about what's really going on out in the world.
And just the last question, what, of all the gangs you've seen around the world, which is the least one you'd want to be thrown into as a lifelong member?
That's a hard one. Because the straight answer would be all of them I would not want to become a member of. I'd have to say probably Marasal Trucha. I wouldn't really want to become a member of MS-13 or 18th Street or any of the gangs in El Salvador, purely on the basis that you have a very short life and a very, very violent one.